In the previous episodes, we have looked into how to use one single parameter type inside our class. Now, in this episode, I'm going to show you how to pass in multiple parameter types, or at least two parameter types, in a new class called generics2 or generics2param. So let's create another class called generics2param. We're going to create that class similarly by going into new and clicking on class, and then I'm going to call this generics2param, and this class also won't have the main method inside it because we have already created one single class that will handle all the other classes, and that class will contain the main method. So let's get this done. Now we have a new class. Now we're going to pass in two parameters. One we will call t, and we'll place a comma, and then we'll call this maybe, or more simply, let's call this a, and then we're going to call the second one b. So now we have got two parameterized type, and we're going to create two class instances or instance variables. Sorry, not two instances, rather two instance variables. One will be a. This is going to be int value, and the next one is going to be b str value. And similarly, we're going to create a constructor like the previous example, param, and then we're going to say a, this will be I, and this b will have a parameter of s, and then we're going to create the body of this constructor, and then int val will have the parameter of I, or I will be assigned to the instance variable of int val, and then we're going to assign str val, or we're going to assign s to str val. So now we have got two instance variables, and we have assigned our two parameters into our two instance variables. Now we're going to create two getter methods, and each of those getter methods will actually return the individual types of these two parameter types. So let's do that, and this will be a get int object, and this will return this int val, and the next one will return, or the next one will have a return type of the next parameterized type, which is what we call b as a general case, and this is what we're going to call, or we're going to name the method get str object, and this is going to return this str val. And then third method will be the same as the previous example, which is the show type method, but in here we're going to add another line of code. So let's get the method, and let's copy this, and then let's create the body of the method. Let's paste this in here, and in this case we'll have to change the name, and in this case we will call it, or we will pass in the first instance variable. So let's change the message that will be printed out on our console, or we will say first instance variable. Similarly, we're going to create another statement, and in this statement we're going to get the name, or the instance name, of the second parameterized types instance variable inside this class. So let's do that, str val, and we will say second instance variable, and we are good to go. So let's save this, and let's get to generics main. Let's comment this entire code out, and then we are going to import generics. Actually, you don't have to necessarily do that, but I'm just being explicit in here. Generics to param. Then similarly, just like the previous example, I'm going to create an object, and then I'm going to create or assign an instance to that object. So let's do that. Generics to param. And now the interesting part is that we're going to pass in two class types. One will be integer, comma, and another one will be string. So let's call this to param object, and then we're going to pass in an instance of generics to param class. So this will be generics to param class, and similarly this is also going to match, or this has to match, the signature of what we have used when we declared the object. So this should be the same as this. So let's do that. An integer string. And now, because our constructor requires us to pass in two parameters, or two arguments, because there are two parameters, we need to get back to the generics main class, and we need to assign two values. So the first is an integer, so we will say this will be maybe 2000, and in here for the string part we're going to say this is a string. And there we go, we have our object. Now the object actually doesn't print out or wouldn't show anything on the console, so to do that we will do the same thing like before, and let's do that. System.out println, and this time we're going to say values are, because there will be two values that will be printed out. So the first value will be, or we could just say, you know, oh sorry, I need to create int num and then to param, and I have to get the not the int val, what was the class's name? I guess it was int object. Great. Now I'm going to create another variable called str, and then I'm going to call in the third method, and the third method is get str object. So this will be to param get str, get str object. I guess there is a mistake, and the mistake is, let's copy this, let's paste this, and there we go. And now it's time to print out the values. So this will be the first value num, and then we're going to print out this second value, and let's say this will be str. So we now have two values that will be printed out on our console, and the last thing that we need to do is just like the previous example, this will be to param show type. So now we are done with our code. Let's run this code one more time. So when we run this code, you can clearly see that our code is running perfectly all right, and we have passed in two parameterized types, and one is the integer wrapper class and the other one is the string class. And now we have two types which the generic class can handle, and it has handled all these types gracefully. We don't have to think about any sort of casting or any sort of explicit translation from one primitive or wrapper type to a primitive type. So if we look at the console output, we see that the values are being printed out. One is the 2000, which we have passed in inside this constructor. The other one is this is a string which we also have passed in inside this constructor. Then we get all the we actually get the instance or the class types in at the last line. So if we get back to our class, which is the generics2 param class, we see that we have two parameters that are being passed to this generic class. One is A and the other one is B. And when we get back to the generics main class, we see that inside the main method we're calling in an object, and in that object we are saying that the first parameter will have an argument of integer, or more precisely the first parameter will have a wrapper class of integer, which is A, and this A will be replaced by integer. In all these cases, the A's will be replaced or erased, and the compiler will place integer behind the scenes. You don't have to worry about that. And the second thing is that when we pass in another parameter, or sorry, when we pass in another argument to the second parameter, which is a string, and this string will be assigned or replaced by this B will be replaced by that string argument, and in this case all these B's will be erased by the compiler, and in the place of those B's the string will be placed, which means we are passing in a string parameter for we are passing in a second parameter which will have a data type of string, and this instance variable, or the second instance variable, which is the strval, will also have a string data type. So that was a short example of how to use multiple parameterized types. You can use more to 3 or 4 or maybe more than that, but you shouldn't go so long, because it's wise to actually keep your methods short and to keep your classes concise.